and today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books. So today is actually my birthday. I'm turning 22 today. It's actually the day before when I'm filming this, but when you're seeing this, it will be my birthday. So I thought, what better way to celebrate my birthday than to talk about my favorite books out of all the ones that I have read in my lifetime so far. So I'm literally going to be talking about like all of my favorites. I know that there's a lot that I've forgotten, but I have like my bed is full of books right next to me. My desk is full of books. I have a ton of books that I'm going to be talking about, and I'm not really going to be going into what they're about because this isn't really a recommendations video. It's just kind of a personal preference and talking about why I love these books and why they mean so much to me. So with that being said, let's just dive on in. I know I'm gonna forget if I don't talk about it now. I don't know where my copy is, but that is Fall of Giants by Ken Follett. I don't know how to say his last name because I've heard many different ways to say it. But this is a book that I was actually given by someone, and I wanted to read it, but I didn't really want to read it because it's so big. Like, it's 1,000 pages, or I think like 900 something pages. But then I ended up reading it, and I remember I was reading it late at night and I could not put it down. That's one of the main books that when I'm like, what's a book that I haven't been able to put down? That is one of the #1 ones where I couldn't do it. I was just so invested in the lives of these characters. It follows them through World War I, and I just wanted to know everything that was going to happen to them. I was like absolutely hooked on that story. I've read the second one now and I really liked that one too, but I haven't read the third one yet, and I haven't read any of his other novels, and I really need to get into them considering how much I loved that one. The other adult book that I have on this list is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I loved this so much, and it was a lot more than I was expecting to once again. I loved all the different references in here. I loved the characters, and I loved the world and the video game stuff. It was so cool and a really fun read. So now I have a ton of classics on this list because there are a ton of classics that I have read and loved. So admittedly, a lot of this is by old dead British white dudes, but part of that is because that's what I was assigned to read for classes. So I really just need to read a bit more diversely in classics, and that is something that I have been working on as of late. But of course, I need to start off with The Complete Alice by Lewis Carroll because you guys know how much I absolutely adore this story. There's just something about the whimsy and the nonsensicalness of it. It just really brings me back to being a kid again, and I love reading different interpretations of it. I took a class every single year in university where I would study the story because I just loved seeing all of my profs' different perspectives on it because everyone has a different perspective on it. It's really a story that's open to interpretation, and I think that's part of what makes it amazing, and I will just never get sick of it. I love it a lot. I guess I'll start off with children's classics because I have a ton here because I really love children's classics. So we have The Wizard of Oz by Frank L. Baum, and this is just such a great story. It's so iconic, and I think it's for a good reason because it's so much fun. Then we have Peter Pan by Jm Barrie. I think this is just such a fun story. Once again, I love the fact that children's stories just give you the opportunity to escape to these fantastical worlds, and they really bring you back to being a child again. You can do that in adult books as well, but I just feel like there's something about places like Neverland and Wonderland that really bring you back to being a kid and being carefree and having tons of fun. Next is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. This is a story that as a Canadian kid I grew up with, and I grew up watching the movies with, I think her name is Megan Fellows or something. She was in Rain recently, but that's what I grew up with. I never actually read the original story until I was in my second year, I think, of university, and I took a class on Canadian literature. Admittedly, I wasn't super excited about reading it because when I was a kid I found it kind of boring, that and like the Avonlea stories and all that I was just kind of bored by, but when I finally picked it up I was just absolutely encapsulated by Anne and her imagination, and she's just such an annoying but lovable character who I think just brings you back once again to being a kid, and that's what makes this story so great. So I definitely did end up falling in love with it when I finally picked it up. Next is Heidi by Johannes. This is a story that I didn't really know about until I saw this edition, and I was like, I have to have it. Somehow it just kind of escaped my radar for whatever reason, but it's about a little girl in Switzerland, and it's such a heartwarming and fun and wholesome story, and I loved it. Next is A Little Princess by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I grew up watching the movie for this one, and I loved the movie, and then when I finally picked up the book, I loved the book even more, and I was just like, this is amazing and beautiful, and I just love it so much. And I also really love The Secret Garden by her as well. It is such, once again, a great and wholesome story. I love the fact that Mary is such a contrary character, for lack of a better word. She really is just a character that she's kind of unlikable, and she's a little bit of a brat, and the story is really about her outgrowing that, and you don't, I think, see that a lot in children's lit, so I love loved it. This video is gonna be really long, but next I have some Shakespeare. So first of all, for the tragedies, I have Romeo and Juliet and Titus Andronicus as my favorites. I loved studying these. They really made me fall in love with Shakespeare again, and I think he's just very witty. However, I do tend to prefer the comedies, and I picked two of those as well. So first is As You Like It, which I actually saw at the Globe a couple of years ago, which was amazing. And then the second one is A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is my ultimate #1 favorite play by Shakespeare that I have read so far because I still have tons to read. And next I just have some general classics. So first, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I read this recently, and studying it just like on my own, I really fell in love with the story, and I think it's just amazing that it's kind of questioning who the real monster is. Is it Dr. Frankenstein or is it his monster? I was fascinated by the whole thing. Next is Northanger Abbey by Jane Austen. I love Jane Austen, but her other two books that I've read, Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice, I've really enjoyed, but I feel like I need to go back and reread them so then I can like fully appreciate them, because I kind of remember reading them a little bit quickly. But this one I studied alongside the text that it's actually kind of poking fun at, the Castle of Otranto, or Tonto. I don't know what kind of castle it is, but it's a castle. But I just thought it was so fun and witty, and I just really appreciate her writing. Next is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. I feel like this is just such an iconic gothic story, and I loved it. Jane Eyre is a great character, and I just found this really fun to once again kind of independent study, like the nerd that I am. And the final classic on this list, there are, I feel like, so many that I'm forgetting and so many that I haven't read yet, but the final one is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. I feel like this is just such an iconic classic, and it's for good reason. I haven't read Go Set a Watchman, and I don't want to because I feel like it might ruin my love for this story, but I read this in grade 10 and I really loved it. I love Scout as a character, and I think it's just a great story, and it will be one that will always be relevant. So now the rest of the books on this list are all YA, which is crazy. There's a ton here, but let's do this. So first I'm gonna start off with two books that I feel like you guys know are going to show up on here. So first is The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. I've talked about my love of this book a million times, but I just think it's amazing and magical, and you need to read it. It's such a poignant and touching story, and it's so good. And don't be put off by the fact that it's narrated by Death. That's part of the reason why it is amazing. And the other book is The Fault in Our Stars by John Green, which I really credit with a lot of my love of reading. This and The Book Thief are kind of the two books that introduced me to my true passion for reading. I now have a new John Green book on this list though, because Turtles All the Way Down was so amazing, and I loved it so much that it definitely needs to be on this list. And I also have another one that is somewhere hiding. I think it's right here, but I'm trying to pick it up, but it's not working. There we go. Looking for Alaska by John Green. These are my top 3 favorite John Green books. I love them so much. Next is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This is another book that I feel like really introduced me to a love of reading, but in particular a love of YA. This is a really twisted dystopian, but I think it shows all of the different things that YA can do as a genre. It is a very multifaceted genre, and I think that's part of why it's amazing. Next I have the whole Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children trilogy by Ransom Riggs, because this is just an amazing trilogy. It's so imaginative. It's unlike anything that I've ever read before, and it is probably one of the most unique books that I've ever read. I kind of struggled to say most there, but I got there. But the fact that it has like all of these different pictures in it, and the stories kind of built around them and incorporating them, it's so cool and just great. Next is Salt to the Sea and Between Shades of Grey by Brutus. I really love historical fiction. In particular, I'm really fascinated by World War II. I also really love the Victorian era. That's kind of what I specialized in my English degree, but I haven't read as many Victorian historical fictions in YA, so let me know if you have any good ones to recommend. But YA historical fiction is rife with World War II books, and Brutus is, I think, one of the best authors of it. I love the fact that she doesn't flinch away from the hard stuff and doesn't sugarcoat anything just because it's directed toward a younger age group. She really just goes in for it, and it makes for very powerful stories which you can't forget even if you wanted to. And sometimes you do, because they're really, really sad, but they are amazing and will stay with you forever. Speaking of a book that's amazing and powerful and will stay with you forever, next is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. The Hate You Give is arguably a modern classic in my opinion. It's a story that I think is going to be around forever and relevant forever, kind of in the same vein of To Kill a Mockingbird. It's a story that I think everyone could learn a lot from, and that's why I think it's a very important read and why I loved it a lot. Next is The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. This is once again another really powerful read. This one deals with immigration, and it has this beautiful love story that is written in the most fascinating and amazing way, and I love what it muses on. You have two characters that are very different. One's very analytical and logical, and the other one is very artistic and kind of not flighty, but a bit of a dream dreamer. So you have these two characters that start this relationship that's doomed to failure in the end, and it follows that, and it just examines so many different facets of the relationship and questions of philosophy, and I think it's so good, so well done, and amazing. Next is The Unexpected Everything by Morgan Matson. Morgan Matson is one of my favorite contemporary authors and one of my favorite authors in general, and this is my favorite book of hers that I have read so far. I just really connected with the main character and how she likes to have a plan for everything, but then her plan ends up getting completely destroyed, and then she's like, what do I do now? Not only her, but also the love interest in this novel I really connected with, and I could really appreciate him as an artist, and I felt like I just really connected with that. I could really level with him. Not to mention there's many adorable puppies in this book. Next is The Diviners by Liva Bray. I read the first book of this one, and then I listened to the audiobook for the second, and I started listening to the audiobook for the third, but I think this is just a book that I need to actually like physically read. And that is partially because the writing of this book is just absolutely delectable. It feels like you're just eating like a really good cupcake, to be honest, and you just want to savor it, and it's just like, this is amazing. I love the use of perspective in this. I loved how descriptive it was. It was just so good and built the creepy atmosphere that this book has, and it transports you right into 1920s New York City, where there's all of these weird things happening and you're trying to figure out, alongside the main character Evie, what is going on. So this is just an amazing book. I love Liva Bray, and her writing is just top notch. Next is, I think, the most recent read on this list, and that is Book of 1,000 Days by Shannon Hale. I loved this book way more than I was expecting to. Dashti is such a great heroine in this novel. She's kind of the underdog that you see really rise up, and she ends up coming out on top in the end, even though you think that she might not, because she's such a pure and kind-hearted character that she kind of lets everyone do whatever. But you're really rooting for her the entire time, and her voice just adds such an amazing element to this story, and it was just so good. Next up is the Codename Verity duology by Elizabeth Wein. This is once again, or Wein, I think it's Wein, but this is once again a World War II historical fiction, and these are very, very powerful stories. Elizabeth Wein is one of my other favorite authors of World War II historical fiction, and she just does amazing things with it. She really just writes characters that you really love, but you know that everything is going to be terrible for them, so then you're kind of sad the entire time, but it's still a beautiful story. Next up is the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo. Really anything by Leigh Bardugo. Language of Thorns, the Grisha trilogy, also Wonder Woman, I am obsessed with. I love her. She's one of my favorite authors. I think she is amazing. I love the way that she writes characters. That's like my favorite thing about her. Particularly in Six of Crows, the group dynamics from those characters are great, and even in Wonder Woman, they are great, but I love the fact that Wonder Woman is so empowering. I love Leigh Bardugo a lot. I just love all of these books, and they are amazing. Next up is Winger by Andrew Smith. I feel like this is the most unexpected book on this list because it just doesn't seem like something that I would enjoy. It was once again one of those books that really surprised me with how emotionally poignant it was, and I ended up really loving it and just bawling my eyes out at the end. Next up is A List of Cages by Robin Rowe. This is a book that I definitely could not put down when I was reading it, no matter how much I wanted to. I just really wanted to know what was going to happen to these characters because I came very invested in their lives. But it ended up being a very beautiful and powerful story. I really like powerful stories. I feel like you're getting from this list what I enjoy. Next is Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone by J.K. Rowling. I kind of debated including this on my list just because I feel like I don't love it as much as a lot of other people did, and that's because when I was a kid I was kind of like, meh. The rest of my family and my sisters like Harry Potter, so like, meh, no, not for me. But then when I finally did read it, I did really, really love it, and I want to reread it soon. I feel like it's just such an iconic story, and it introduces a lot of kids to reading, and it introduces them to magic, which I think is just an amazing thing. And I will say that it does have a lot to do with why I love magic and why I love fantasy so much, and the movies in particular I did grow up watching because I watched them all the time, but I do really, really love the books, and I would consider it one of my favorite books. Next is Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. I just really identified with Kath in this story, and this is a book that I read super quickly, even though it is quite big and the font really isn't that big, but I got through this in one day when I read 3 books in that same day. I just couldn't put this book down because I was so invested in Kath and how much I identified with her. She was in her first year of university in this book. I was in my second year when I read it, and I just was like, this was literally my life, and I was just so in touch with it, and I loved it. Next is another recent read, and that is Stalking Jack the Ripper and Hunting Prince Dracula by Carrie Maniscalco. I love Audrey Rose so much, and I loved these books. They surprised me with how much I ended up really enjoying them. I love the romance in them, and it's kind of hard for me to find a romance that I enjoy lately, but I just felt like Audrey Rose is such a headstrong and unstoppable character, really, which I found really inspiring, and I loved how scientific these got, and I found them to be very unique and fascinating, frankly. Next is I See London, I See France by Sarah Mlynowski. I think if any book on this list I were to say I really love just because of the personal connection I have with it, it would be this one. When I saw this book at the bookstore, I honestly opened it up and I saw this map and I was like, oh my god, because when I went on my own backpacking trip this past May with my sister, we went to all of the places on this map except for like, I think there's like 2 or 3 that we didn't go to. But everywhere else is exactly where we went. There's even Interlaken in Switzerland here, and I was like, this is amazing and I really need it because it just reminds me of that trip and it was such a good time. So I just love this book because of the memories that it brought back, and it was a really good book too. Definitely a lighter, fluffy read, but it was really good. Next is The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender by Leslie Walton. This is a magical realism, and I love magical realism, and it's in part because of this novel. This is like a book that I wish I had written. It is so whimsical and beautifully written, and it follows the generations of this family up until the main character, who is born with wings, and you're following Ava Lavender just kind of living her life with wings. The ending really surprised me, and it was a little bit graphic, so a bit of a trigger warning there, but it was such a beautiful story that I just really loved, and I think the writing for it was perfect. Next is Heartless by Marissa Meyer. This is my favorite Alice in Wonderland retelling that I've ever read. I felt like it just did a really good job of mimicking Lewis Carroll's writing style with all of that nonsense and whimsy, and it was just a very clever story, which I think is what you really want from an Alice in Wonderland retelling. However, it did also stand on its own really well and add to that kind of canon, I guess, but not really the canon, but you know what I mean. All in all, it was just a really great story all about the Queen of Hearts, and I would like there to be a sequel, please. I know we're not getting one, but it would be amazing if we got one. Next is Throne of Glass and A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J Maas. These are probably the most controversial books on this list, arguably, but I did really enjoy them. They are some of my favorite fantasies, and I just love the way that Sarah J Maas writes. She is great at writing. Also, my shirt kind of matches like exactly Throne of Glass. Next is The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. I fell in love with the story of the Raven Boys and this whole Raven Cycle quartet. I would have picked up the whole thing, but like I already have a ton of books to put away, so I just didn't want to commit to any more. But this is another book that I feel like is really driven by the characters, but also the story in it is so inventive and just keeps you hooked the entire time. And the final book on this list is The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. This is another book that I really love because of how much I identified with it. I really felt like Molly was just like speaking to me. I honestly have such an affinity for this book because of that, and it's one that has stuck with me since I read it, and I feel like it's a book that I will reread many times to come. So those are all my favorite books, or at least the ones that I like stood out to me when I was looking at my shelves. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, it's a bit of a more casual video, but I thought it might be kind of fun to do for my birthday. I don't know. But if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe. I put out new videos every Monday and Thursday, and you can also follow me on Twitter. My Twitter is at HalesInBookland, and you can also follow me on my Instagram. My Instagram is at HaleyInBookland. But all of that stuff is down below for you guys. So I will see you guys in the next video.